Over the last 5 years, the Phoenix Suns have been one of the worst teams in the NBA. Whether that be from an on-court perspective, the number of head coaches they've gone through, or the many draft blunders throughout the years, they haven't had anything resembling real success in a pretty long time. However, they did start to see some progress this season, although the bar was set pretty low. And if you squint a little bit, you can start to see something resembling a bright future involving Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Kelly Oubre, if a few things go their way. So welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and today's video is going to be all about what is next for the Phoenix Suns. Now, I'm going to do this in a couple of different sections. I'm going to talk about their season performance from this most recent season. Then I'm going to talk about what their building blocks are for the future in terms of some players that I really think that they should be building around. And then we'll talk about some draft and some free agency stuff moving forward as well. But really quickly before the video gets started, if you enjoy content like this, then consider subscribing and leaving a like rating down below as well is a great way to let me know that you are enjoying the content. But with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So let's start by talking about their 2019-20 season performance. Obviously, the season isn't over with the restart in Orlando for Phoenix, but still, we can talk mostly about what their year looked like. And it got off to a pretty good start. They got off to an 11-12 start from a record standpoint, which for them is pretty promising, but they just couldn't sustain it. And I almost went with a C- grade here relative to the expectations that some people had that this team would be competing for like 40 wins potentially in the Western Conference. But because of the DeAndre Ayton suspension, I did give them a C because that obviously makes it much more difficult for them to compete when one of their best players misses a quarter of the year. And that Ayton suspension is really one of the biggest storylines here. They went 12-18 with him in the lineup, but as I'm going to continue to cover in this video, this is the guy that really determines so much about the future of the Phoenix Suns. Overall, they were 16th in offensive rating and 20th in defensive rating with a 26-39 record pre-restart. And with Ayton in the lineup for an entire season, they likely would have had something right around a top half of the league offensive rating, which is something to build around moving forward. Gives them at least a little bit of an identity as a relatively good offensive team. However, at the end of the day, relative to the expectations that I and many other people had for this team coming into the season, this was a bit of a disappointing year for them. So let's go ahead and look and see what their future looks like moving forward. So in the building blocks category, for me, there are three big pieces to talk about. The first is obviously Devin Booker. I won't spend too much time here. We know what the deal is with him. The efficiency really increased with Ricky Rubio there as a legitimate point guard to take away some of the offensive responsibilities for him, which was a good sign because some of the percentages for him, specifically from three-point range last year, were not good at all. So it was nice to see that with a legitimate point guard there alongside him to make it to where he doesn't have to do everything offensively and he can do some of the stuff off the ball that he is so good at, definitely helped him with some of those efficiency issues in the past. And again, we know what kind of player Devin Booker is at this point. He's a great scorer, not a very good defender, and he most likely can't be the best player on a 50-win team in the Western Conference. Next up, though, let's talk about a guy that is really kind of the focal point of this entire video at certain points here, and it's DeAndre Ayton. And this is the guy that, in my opinion, the entire future pretty much revolves around in Phoenix. I don't think it's an overstatement at all to say that he drives the entire direction of the franchise moving forward. And unfortunately, we really didn't get to see him play very many games this year because of the suspension. But in the games that he did play, the numbers are awesome from a per game standpoint. And if he's going to continue to be like a 20-10 guy on good efficiency, that is a huge plus on the offensive end. Now, on the other hand, the turnovers definitely need to go down, and he relies a little bit too much on the mid-range for my liking for a guy his size, but he's still kind of growing into what he is going to become offensively. And at this point, it's pretty clear that he has all of the tools to be a great offensive player. The athleticism, the coordination, the skills, the touch. And at this point, he has about as good of a chance of any other young guy in the league to become a dominant offensive big man. Now, defensively, there were some encouraging signs this season as well, albeit in a limited sample size. The rim protection was better, and he didn't look nearly as lost at times as he did last season. Now, on that end, effort and energy are just going to be the biggest things with him, and the ceiling on his impact on winning basketball games is really only as high as how good he is defensively. But still, I'm not kidding when I say that the development of DeAndre Ayton could be franchise-altering for this team. If he becomes what he can be, they're a playoff team with the potential to do more. But if he just becomes a soft, offensive-only big with empty numbers, then a Devin Booker trade is likely going to happen within the next 18 months. I think it's that dramatic of a difference between DeAndre Ayton becoming what he can be and DeAndre Ayton just kind of settling at what his floor is for his career. So there's a lot of pressure there, but I'm personally rooting for Ayton. Next up now, the last building block I have is Kelly Oubre. He had a career year in Phoenix this season and has become a legit high-level complementary wing with more scoring upside than your typical 3-and-D type player. Now, he needs to continue to improve his three-point percentage, and he had knee surgery at the end of the season, but at just 24 years old, he is a legit piece that should continue to grow alongside Booker and Ayton, and is a really interesting 2021 free agent as well. In terms of some of the other guys that I don't consider building blocks, the first is Ricky Rubio, and as I talked about earlier, putting a legit point guard alongside Devin Booker for the first time in his career turned out to be a good move, but he's about to turn 30 years old and is just a solid player to me, so he's nothing really game-changing for this group. Next up is Mikal Bridges, who got plenty of minutes this season, and he can defend, but I need to see way more in the three-point game to really get all that excited about him. And it's a bit disappointing because he's a player that I really liked in the draft when he came out, but it feels a little bit like they're playing him more out of necessity because they need guys on the wing rather than being all that excited about putting him on the floor. And next year is going to be a huge season for him because typically the third year for a player is when we see a relatively big jump, if we're going to see one at all. And if he becomes a legit floor spacer, then I'm going to be all in on him. But until then, not so much. And last up is Cameron Johnson. And it's a bit of a similar story to Bridges, but the other way around. He can shoot, and that's about it. And having a 40% three-point shooter on pretty high attempts is always great to have, but I'm just not going to put a 23-year-old rookie shooting specialist in the building blocks category until I see more from him. And other than that, there's really not much else on this roster to speak of unless you're getting overly excited about Dario Saric, who I still do hold out hope for, but I just don't really know if it's going to happen at this point, or Ty Jerome or Frank Kaminsky. But even with that said, that group of three of Devin Booker, DeAndre Ayton, and Kelly Oubre, and Ayton's ability to really raise the ceiling of this team makes it a really solid B+ group for me. And now we get to the draft and trade possibilities for this team. And really, there's not a whole lot all that exciting to talk about here. As of right now, the Suns are projected to have the 10th pick in the draft, which is likely, especially in this draft class, to just be another complimentary piece, just like Cameron Johnson, who they got the year before. And they don't have any extra draft picks in addition to their own. And Kelly Oubre is the biggest trade piece on the roster outside of some big Devin Booker trade. And he's a 2021 free agent. So unless you're counting Booker as a trade piece, which I'm not right now, I don't see a ton here in the draft or trade categories without some kind of crazy lottery luck or big development from a player that I do not see at the moment. So we won't spend too much time here. But now let's talk about the overall future of the Phoenix Suns. So they go into this offseason with almost $92 million in payroll, which is about $23 million in cap space. And one option here is that they can spend all of that money on one big impact piece on the wing or at the four and hope that DeAndre Ayton continues to develop and becomes a star, and that is good enough to make them a really good team. For example, what if they threw $20+ million a year at Malik Beasley or $15+ million a year at someone like Paul Millsap, and you kind of lock yourself into this group? Because Kelly Oubre would need a new contract in 2021, and then DeAndre Ayton would need a new one after that. So even with Rubio's contract coming off the books along the way, they'd be capped out if they spent all of their salary cap space this offseason. But if you think a Rubio, Booker, Oubre, Beasley, or Millsap / Ayton 5-man unit is good enough with development from the young guys to push for 45 to 50 wins, then maybe that's the move. It's risky, but it could pay off. And again, so much of that depends on DeAndre Ayton. Now in 2021, they have $78 million currently committed in payroll, so they'll have enough for a max slot if they can convince one to come to Phoenix, but they'd have to let Kelly Oubre walk, and that doesn't seem to make much sense to me. And as a result, and this is different than what I normally recommend, I think it makes more sense for Phoenix to take a swing on a $20+ million a year guy this offseason if they can get one, and hope the young guys improve enough to make them a legitimately good team. Devin Booker is already on a max, and Kelly Oubre being a 2021 free agent means that they're going to be capped out in a year regardless if they bring him back. And you might as well do what you can with your cap space now, bring back Oubre, and move forward with that group, with Cameron Johnson, Mikal Bridges, and whoever they get in the 2020 draft as trade assets to make another move if it makes sense. And hopefully some combination of those moves can bring some kind of success to Phoenix. Now, next season is going to be a huge year for them. If they are able to make some progress, then maybe they can talk themselves into making some of those big moves beyond the 2020 offseason around Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton. But if it's more of the same of what we've seen over the years, then we might also be looking at a reset scenario with a Devin Booker trade coming within the next 18 months, as I mentioned earlier. Because at that point, he will likely want out, then Ayton will need a new contract in the summer of 2022, Ricky Rubio will be a free agent, and things will pretty much be right back to the drawing board for Phoenix. And so at the end of the day, there's really just a ton of variance in what could potentially happen for the Phoenix Suns moving forward. They could end up being a team that's a 45 to 50 win team with one of the best young bigs in the league in DeAndre Ayton, Devin Booker rounding out his game into more than just a great scorer and shooter, and some other nice complementary pieces around them. Or in a couple of years, we could be looking at an entirely different team with both Booker and Ayton on different rosters throughout the league as a result of another teardown in Phoenix. It could go really either way, and there's no way really to predict currently what is going to happen with this group moving forward. But as I continue to mention, if DeAndre Ayton turns into the player that he can, all bets are off in Phoenix, and they will definitely be a team to watch out for moving forward. And yeah, there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.